Greetings and welcome back, one and all, to my third episode in the 500p Reassembly tournament. This is Group C. Now, before we get underway, there are just a few little things, or rather big things, that I need to cover. Some changes that have been made. Namely, the Will-o'-the-Wisp by Gravelord was not on the tournament roster. And unfortunately, unfortunately, Gravelord wasn't on the roster because the ship didn't arrive on time. But unfortunately, I've had to substitute Gravelord's ship in place of Beware due to what I feel was a particularly bad show of absolute disregard for sportsmanship in the ship's design. Now, I am aware that some people dislike the idea of multi-faction ships, but I had not specifically excluded them, and I intended to stand by that. I know that there are a few multi-faction ships in the tournament, and where most of them content themselves to use only components from player factions, Beware made use of components that were flat out not available to any player factions. Specifically, what I felt really was the straw that broke the camel's back, if you like, was the inclusion of teleporting mechanics. And whatever weapons Beware was using there, wow, what just happened there? Did it just teleport? I believe it may have. But a lot of that could simply be that I don't understand the what's making the ship work. Ah, okay, yeah, it is flat out teleporting. That is very peculiar. Whenever the Beware seemed to about to take critical damage, it would teleport away, very, very far away in most cases, and that I felt was perhaps not technically breaking the rules, but was certainly breaking the spirit of the rules. So Beware, unfortunately, has been dropped. That means the new lineup for Group C is Will-o'-the-Wisp, CSHF Queen Mark II, Sunfire, the Optic Anomaly, the Bday Arrow, and Shield Head. So, with the unfortunate shenanigans out of the way, I probably will include, or may have already cut in a snippet of the fights that I saw with Beware before I decided, no, this as much as I want to stand by what I originally said, a line has to be drawn in the sand, and this, regardless where that line was drawn, this has crossed it. It's not even on the same beach anymore. But let's get this tournament underway. So first up, we have the Bday Arrow against Sunfire. Now, Sunfire is making use of faction that I usually don't use. I really love the way they look, but they feel underpowered to me most of the time. But we're going to see how Sunfire does. Quite a lot of DACA there, but the Bday Arrow is extremely heavily armored. Nevertheless, the Sunfire does seem to be wearing down the Bday Arrow's armor. Well done, Sunfire. I'm actually a little bit impressed by that. As I said, I tend to find this faction fairly underwhelming in power, but, oh, there we go. It noticed a flaw in the armor, or rather a hole in the outer shell near the cockpit, and just rushed in for the kill. Well done, Sunfire. Pardon me. You'd think I'd been drinking something fizzy, but I haven't. I've just been drinking water, and I've got the hiccups. Why, water? Why have you betrayed me so? Okay, they're just going to be strafing back and forth. No, there we go. Sunfire has managed to make a hole and is going for the kill, but Bday Arrow doing its best to try and present its most fortified side to the enemy. Well done there, Bday Arrow, but unfortunately, you did not make the cut. So now, Bday Arrow against the Will-o'-the-Wisp. Let's see how Gravelord's creation can manage in this engagement. Quite a nippy little vessel, to be fair. Lots of DACA again, though the Bday Arrow very heavily armored, and an equivalent amount of DACA, I fancy. Okay, let's see how these two go. And not too bad on the whole, I must say. The Bday Arrow having a lot of trouble getting through the Will-o'-the-Wisp's shields. I do like the design, though. I very much like the color scheme and just the general theme of Gravelord's ships with this one. But the Bday Arrow just is not going down. Will-o'-the-Wisp has vastly more points, though. So if this goes to a point victory, Will-o'-the-Wisp is going to win convincingly. And the Bday Arrow is now in a wild spin. Is Will-o'-the-Wisp going to be able to get a kill? Unlikely. Not with a spin like that. No. No, the Bday arrow managed to survive long enough to force it to go to points, but it was not much of a victory either way. The Bday arrow doesn't seem to be able to bring enough damage against the Will-o'-the-Wisp, especially with aiming like that. It's got forward-facing guns. As long as the Bday arrow could actually point towards its enemy, they would have a really, really good time of it, but its maneuvering thrusters just don't seem able to keep the ship spinning enough, except when it's taking huge amounts of damage. That said, Gravelord has taken a fair chunk of punishment there. He's lost his shield, and that is one of the main things holding his ship together, I fancy. All that said, the Bday arrow is actually doing quite well for itself. But as long as the Gravelord can avoid getting right in front, no, it cannot. Well done, Bday arrow. Well done indeed. Let's see if which one is going to go through, though. This is the deciding fight between these two ships. It looks like Gravelord off to an early point lead. It just needs to avoid that enormous amount of Daka from the front there. Just like that, just continually strafing. But I fancy if it even misses one strafe, it's probably going to go down just the same way it did in the last fight. Let's speed things up a little bit. Oh, there we go. Oh no, just tickling the shields there from the Bday arrow. Doesn't seem quite able to turn fast enough. And Gravelord's ship, Will-o'-the-Wisp, knows what to expect and is wisely saying nope to that and just backing out of the engagement. But now the Bday arrow has taken a fair chunk of damage to its armor. Its shields are overwhelmed. I fancy the Bday arrow may not be able to recover from this. Not with only 2 seconds left on the clock. And the win goes to the Will-o'-the-Wisp. Congratulations there. Right, Bday arrow up against Shieldhead. Now, Shieldhead has a very nice design, honestly. And it certainly lives up to its name. It's got a very large weapon at the back there, but its shield did not hold for very long, unfortunately. We'll see if it can manage to bring that up in this engagement, but at the same time, no, both enemies are taking down their shields more or less in synchronization here. But will the larger, more powerful gun hold out? It looks like it will, actually. Again, I think the Bday arrow is suffering mostly from the fact that its main weapon has to be pointing towards... the ship has to be pointing towards its enemy for its main weapon system to actually do much damage. Whereas the turreted weapon systems, especially things like missiles, they don't suffer with that. Still, the Bday arrow has done quite well for itself, I must say. Given such a simple-looking design, it has pulled off a few surprises in its fight so far. But I think this one is going to convincingly go to Shieldhead. Unless it intentionally sits in front of that enormous barrage of fire from the front, then I don't think the Bday arrow can really put up much of a fight. Now it's gone into a wild spin. It's never going to be able to point its weapons properly. I think it's all over. Indeed it is. Okay, next up we have a fight against the Optic Anomaly. Now this looks like a very interesting ship indeed. Look at all the different bristling weapon systems and thrusters. Oh, gloriousness. That is fantastic. Very nicely done indeed. Though you've taken a fair chunk of damage in that initial volley, whereas the Bday arrow is only taking damage to armor by the looks of it. Without a shield system or heavy armor around the outside, that initial barrage is so deadly. If it can even clip you with it, it'll take some parts of your ship off. Cleave off the thruster component, or even the nose of the ship, depending on which direction the Optic Anomaly is trying to move in. Oh, there we go. It looks like... No. Actually, the Optic Anomaly has pulled back there. I thought that was honestly going to be the end of the Optic Anomaly when the Bday arrow was rushing in there and its main weapons were primed, but the Optic Anomaly managed to strafe at the last moment and save itself, I fancy. The drones are now really starting to accumulate the damage on the Bday arrow as well. I suspect that the drones alone could win this fight at this point. I don't think the Bday arrow is going to be able to pull back from this. But there we go. Okay, Optic, 1 win. Let's have time sped up a little bit for this round, unless we see something interesting happen. But by the looks of it, it's going to be a replay of the last one. The Optic Anomaly is just going to keep strafing whenever the Bday arrow is unleashing its main weapon system. And now it's in a frantic spin. It'll never be able to aim that. So this game is over, I would imagine. There we go. Optic Anomaly, first win. And finally for the Bday Arrow, the CS HF Queen Mark II. Now, this one looks like a very heavy drone ship. It's got some point defense. It's got an awful lot of thrusters. I suspect that it's going to be able to keep distance between it and the Bday Arrow easily. Ooh, that said, thank goodness for those strafing thrusters, otherwise that could have been horrifically bad. I fancy that the Bday Arrow would only need to land one solid volley from that main weapon system to pretty much cleave the Queen Mark II in half. But with all of those drones, I don't think the Bday Arrow is really going to be able to fight. It isn't getting an opportunity to face the enemy. Oh no, there we are. But once again, it's having to turn around. It hasn't the ability to strafe like the other ships do, and it is really suffering for that. I think the main thing that would have helped the Bday Arrow is to add more maneuvering thrusters. Possibly even sacrificing some of its weapon systems in order to get it. Because right now, with all of those weapon systems, if they can never fire, then all of them are useless. Whereas if you took 2 or even 4 of the guns off in favor of some more thrusters, at least the guns that remain would be able to still hit their targets. But right now, this is just going to be another drone fest, I fancy. So I'm going to go up to 8 times speed, maybe 4. No, 8 times speed for now. It doesn't look like the Bday Arrow is ever going to be able to train its weapon system on the CS HF Queen Mark II, unfortunately. Right, Sunfire up against Willow the Wisp. Let's see how you guys do. Speed it up until you get in close. Now, the Sunfire's large weapon system may be a bit of a pain for the Will-O-the-Wisp if it can ever actually hit it. But the Will-O-the-Wisp is doing a very good job of dodging. Very good job indeed. Alright, let's speed up things just slightly. There we go. Now, this is a very cautious engagement by both ships, honestly. Though the Will-O-the-Wisp is doing the more damage and thus earning the more points. But realistically speaking, although it's actually hitting the Sunfire, the damage is superficial at best. It's not managing to focus enough damage to actually do any significant systems damage. It's just hacking at parts of armor. And by the time that it comes around again to fire on that same part, it's generally repaired. Some of the outer thrusters are taking a little bit of damage, but that was a very stately dance kind of engagement there. Not very much action going on, just lots of skipping around and exchanging volleys. But unfortunately for the Sunfire, it is significantly worse at hitting the Will-O-the-Wisp than the Will-O-the-Wisp is at hitting the Sunfire, which I suppose doesn't surprise me too much given the relative size difference on the ships and the fact that the Will-O-the-Wisp is as much thrusters as it is guns. Well, that said, the Sunfire did have very large thrusters, but I think the Will-O-the-Wisp just used its thrusters a little bit better. Right, up against the Shield Head now. Let's see how this one goes. There's a much more traditional engagement here. The Shield Head trying to go toe-to-toe with the Sunfire. I think that was a very bad idea. The Sunfire is far too bulky to be able to be easily wiped out there. No. Well done there, Sunfire. Next up. There we go. And once again, exactly the same thing. The Shield Head and the Sunfire are both heavy brawlers, but the Sunfire is just the heavier of those two brawlers. Right, we are up against Apoapsis Gaming. Now, I'm not sure how this one's going to go because Apoapsis... the Optic Anomaly, I apologize, is far more maneuverable. Again, like the Will-O-the-Wisp, it can reverse, it can strafe, it can turn with relative ease. Plus, it's got drones. So, although those drones are getting shot down fairly quickly... Ooh, you're getting close there. If you could just connect with a couple of those shots... No, not quite. Sunfire very nearly managed to catch the Apoaptic Anomaly there, but I fancy that this is going to be a repeat of the fight with the Will-O-the-Wisp, where the Apoaptic Anomaly is just always going to be just on the edge. No, wait, a couple of shots have landed. No, they only just scraped the nose of the Apoaptic Anomaly. And that damage is already repaired. Bad luck there, Sunfire. I thought you were about to Show them what for, but no, it seems that your style of combat is just not going to help you against ships like the Optic Anomaly or the Will-o'-the-Wisp. They are far too maneuverable, and they know it, and they will use that maneuverability to deadly effect against your lumbering, though no doubt extremely dangerous form. We'll just keep this at 4 times speed. Unless something really kicks off, I'm just going to let this one play out at this speed for now. And wow, the Optic Anomaly has now passed 10 times the score of Sunfire. Okay, final fight for Sunfire against the CS-HF Queen Mark II by Callum Steele. Drones away. Lots of drones as well. So again, though, the point defense is probably going to very easily deal with that, but are you going to be maneuverable enough to stay away from the Sunfire's main guns? You do have a lot of thrusters, but you have lost a chunk of the nose of your ship already. That has affected your ability to launch drones, but you already have so much of them on the field. I fancy you're probably safe. That said, you really do lack that edge in mobility. You have mobility, enough it seems, but not quite as good as the Will-o'-the-Wisp or the Optic Anomaly. As a result, the CS-HF Queen Mark II is far more likely to get just that tiny little bit of damage somewhere critical. As we've already seen, it lost some of its drone components and the forward maneuvering thrusters, but that didn't seem to do enough damage there. Thinking about it, I fancy that the Sunfire could be greatly enhanced with some sort of guided weapon system. A missile or drones would probably do awesome, but I don't think this faction actually has missiles or drones. And props to you for staying with a single faction for your ship. But no, I think this is going to come down to the drones, honestly, and the drones have already done massive amounts of damage to the Sunfire. I don't think it's going to be able to do much to pull this back. So once again, we're going to play this one out at 4 times speed, but I will be watching closely for any damage to the, there we go, to the Queen Mark II, because any damage is likely to be deadly amounts of damage with that particular ship. Oh, it looks like we can go back to times 4 speed. It's just very unfortunate. The Sunfire is always just so close, and yet so far from actually doing the sort of damage that it's clear it would be able to do if it could just slow down its opponents, just slightly. It would only need to do a little bit of thruster damage. But at the moment we have a 3-way tie, and Gravelord is now up against the Shield Head. Let's see how this one does. I fancy that the Will-o'-the-Wisp is not going to find its typical tactic of just dancing around nearly as effective, given that the Shield Head is using lasers. Now, we'll see how true that ends up being, but the Will-o'-the-Wisp has already taken a little bit of damage. Its shield is down. I think it's lost some of its thrusters. Not enough really to do much damage to it yet, but those missiles are certainly contributing. I think the Will-o'-the-Wisp may actually start to struggle here because it's, in an effort to dodge the attacks, is constantly on the move and thus is having a hard time hitting the Shield Head. And the Shield Head's shields are doing a very, very good job of keeping it in this. Though they did just go down. Let's speed things up just slightly. Ooh, it looks like there's a proper engagement going on, and it looks like the Shield Head much, much better in that engagement. Far more focused firepower there when it went head-to-head, and its armor just seems to be doing it a little bit better than the Will-o'-the-Wisp's armor. That said, Will-o'-the-Wisp isn't, well, it is actually getting to the point now where it's very far behind in score, but still, I feel that it's done fairly well, given that this kind of enemy with good accuracy and very long-range weapons is probably its natural and its nemesis, if you like. The Will-o'-the-Wisp seems to be built specifically for taunting very large opponents, but the Shield Head has a good mix of weapon systems right now. It's not relying on any of them particularly, but once it does get in close quarters, that Daka is absolutely ruinous to the Will-o'-the-Wisp. The lasers are keeping its shields down, and then when it does get in close, the Daka can do a huge amount of damage to its thrusters, and once they're gone, the chance of a full-on confrontation start going up dramatically. Once the Will-o'-the-Wisp loses its agility, the Shield Head just being able to plow into it and just unleash all of its firepower at once seems like an inevitability, more or less. But again, Another win for the shield head. Well done there. Now, Will-o'-the-Wisp up against the Optic Anomaly. Let's see how these guys do. Missiles away. Or are they drones? I believe they're missiles. Yes, they're missiles. And again, another ship with lasers. So I fear for the Will-o'-the-Wisp because its shields are really not going to last. Not going to last at all. Thankfully, it does have enough DACA to deal with the incoming missiles. But will it be able to deal with drones as well? That is a question. It's ignoring the drones for the most part, but it's a little bit too fast for the drones to really keep up. So unless it slows down for some reason, it's probably not got too much to worry about. However, those lasers are boring a hole straight through the frontal armor of the Will-o'-the-Wisp, and that is going to be a very big concern. Because once it starts losing some of the thrusters on one side, it's lost almost all of its reverse thrusters right now. It's got 3 thrusters that are just behind a ring of armor. If it loses those, then an entire direction of movement is gone for it, and that is going to sorely impact its ability to stay in this fight, I fancy. Especially with those drones just getting closer and closer and closer. But that was an interesting exchange there. I can't really tell which one came off worse. I think probably the Will-o'-the-Wisp. But it looked for all the world as if the Will-o'-the-Wisp had actually managed to take off some of the Optic Anomaly's weapon systems, but I think I may have just been misreading that, honestly. Given the amount of points on each side, I think this is a clear victor. Well done, Optic Anomaly. Right, again, we're going to speed things up for a little bit, because whilst the Will-o'-the-Wisp has its shields, then the fight is actually quite well balanced. But the moment that shield goes down, the odd missile blow will get in, the odd shot from a drone, and little by little, those thrusters get whittled away at the front. And once enough of them are gone, it's more or less game over for the Will-o'-the-Wisp, I think. There we are, a bit of an engagement there. The reverse thrusters are all gone now, so the whole ship is having to turn in order to change direction. Not that that makes a lot of difference to the Will-o'-the-Wisp, because it's got turreted weapons. But as we can see, more and more of the weapons, the thrusters were gone. Well done there, though. It was a good effort. 3 wins to the Optic Anomaly so far. Right. Now, the final fight for Will-o'-the-Wisp up against the CSHF Queen Mark II. And the Will-o'-the-Wisp significantly faster. I fancy that of the 2 of them, the Will-o'-the-Wisp has much more mobility, despite the fact that the Queen Mark II has a lot of thrusters, though I could be wrong about that. It is doing very well at dodging. The range on the Will-o'-the-Wisp's weapons not really helping it here, and those drones are always getting a couple of shots off because the Queen Mark II is able to launch so many at a time that even though only a few ever seem to be able to get near it before the Will-o'-the-Wisp dances off, they do get a good couple of hits. But I think the Queen has lost too much of its mobility now, and the Will-o'-the-Wisp is right on top of it. I think it's pretty much game over. It's got a couple of point defense guns, but I think only just for show, really. I think it may have 4 in total. That is going to do nothing to the Will-o'-the-Wisp. Unless it can get its drone systems back online, and it almost had one side of its drone systems back, but the Will-o'-the-Wisp took that out. I think this one's a given. Will-o'-the-Wisp is going to go through, if not by points, if not by kill, then by points. I can't actually tell whether it managed to kill it or not. It may have killed it just before the timer ran out, but either way, I think the Will-o'-the-Wisp did quite well in that fight. I don't think the Queen's agility is really going to be able to match up to this. It's been on the edge, agility-wise, compared to the other ships for a little while. If only it could get its drones involved. If it could dance and lead the Will-o'-the-Wisp towards its drones, it would fare a lot better. It does seem to be doing that right now, but no, I don't think it's doing enough at the moment. Though that said, there are a lot of drones in this area. If only the Queen Mark II could just lead the Will-o'-the-Wisp back to all of them. There are so many drones in the sky right now, and the Will-o'-the-Wisp is practically ignoring them, so it's not like it's reducing the number. But there we go, 1 on point once again. So, 3 wins for the Optic Anomaly and the Will-o'-the-Wisp. Alright, let's see how the Optic anomaly does here then. Against the shield head, well, it was a pretty solid first engagement. I don't think either ship has really lost too much, though the shield head does seem to have lost 2 of its weapon systems. But both retain some long-range firepower, but I think this one is going to go to Optic anomaly, honestly. It has done a staggering amount of damage to the shield head, though that said, when it moved in to try and go for the kill there, the weapons that are housed towards the rear of the shield head really did do a good job of dissuading it from continuing its attack run. But I think it's probably going to be over with these missiles coming in and just racking up the points for the Optic anomaly. Though, that said, no, wow, the shield head just pulled ahead at the end there. Fantastic work. Alright, let's see how you're doing now. Much the same, I imagine, in the early game. It was right towards the mid and very much at the end that things started changing hands. But for the time being, as long as Optic anomaly can stay out of range of that huge main gun there, then it should be okay. It certainly got enough range damage. No, it didn't manage to win. Well done, shield head. I am actually kind of surprised by that one. Right, shield head up against the CSHF Queen Mark II. Let's see how this one goes. Shield head doing an attack run. I'm not sure if... No, it does have enough speed to deal with the Queen Mark II. Again, just a little bit too shy on the mobility there. Almost had enough mobility to negate a lot of the damage that has been coming its way in a lot of the battles, but not quite enough. Perhaps shaving off 1 or 2 of its drone systems and using those points to add more thrusters would make the Queen Mark II much more defensible. But for the time being, it looks like shield head is going to win on points, if not kills. It looks like it might win on kills, though. No, didn't quite there. I don't think it managed to get the kill in just before the timer ran out, but it was very, very close. Very close indeed. But again, a ship that relies so heavily on drones, I just don't think it's going to be possible for it to compete against these brawler-type vessels. The drones are just not fast enough, unless the ship that it's fighting is very slow. But as we've seen, the shield head is no slouch when it comes to speed. Despite having not that many thrusters, it uses its thrusters quite well, I feel. But again, I think this one's going to go down to points, if not a kill. And clearly the shield head is going to emerge the victor here. There we go. Right, it comes down to whether the Optic anomaly can defeat the Queen Mark II. If it can, then it's going to be a 2-way tie. If it cannot, then the shield head is going to go forward. I'm going to call it now and say that I fancy the Optic anomaly is going to emerge the victor. Simply because it's got such a good spread of weapon systems, whereas the Queen Mark II relies on its drones, and against such a mobile ship as the Optic anomaly, I really don't think drones are the way to go. I think this is going to be a losing battle, but it's whether it comes down to a kill or points is the main factor here. Though, that said, again, it wouldn't be the first time that I've gotten something completely wrong, and right towards the end, things have changed drastically. I mean, if these drones can get in close enough to take out a lot of the thruster systems on the Optic anomaly, then they may be able to change the tide of this battle. I'm not sure that's very likely, though, but still, all the same, they're doing a good job. They're trying their hardest, bless them. Let's speed things up just a little bit. But I think at this point, it is fair to say the Optic anomaly is going to win at least this first round in their battle, if not the entire match between the Optic anomaly and the Queen Mark II. A very nice design by the Queen Mark II, but I think it just sacrificed a little bit too much in order to get so many drones to launch. A good tactic, perhaps, in longer engagements against less agile foes, but I think that perhaps it would benefit from just losing 1 or 2 of those drone systems and using those points for thrusters instead. Or perhaps a different type of weapon system. Maybe just some guns. But now that it's close quarters combat, the Optic anomaly is vastly superior. Alright, let's see how this one goes. Well, that said, I mean, despite the fact that it's lost its ability to fight, you've got to hand it to the Queen Mark II. It is a very survivable bot. Although it seems exposed, it survives for a long time under quite heavy firepower. But okay, it comes down to the shield head and the apoptic anomaly. Now, in terms of points, they're both close enough that I'm not going to say, well, this one's going to win simply because it cost less. I think both of these ships very, very well done, and both very similar in so many ways. Not least of all, the color scheme, which I find quite funny. But I think of the two, I'm leaning in favor of the apoptic anomaly simply because of its very interesting design. I'm especially fond of the thrusters in the middle here, despite how vulnerable that makes the ship. I also kind of like the way that they've got the thrusters kind of sandwiched together. It almost looks like a biscuit. But I really do like the overall shape of the apoptic anomaly. It's a very, very nice looking ship. Though that said, the shield head is no slouch when it comes to aesthetics either. It has a very nice themed aesthetic to it. It is named the ship after what it looks like. It's kind of got a shielded forward armor compartment, plus it's actually got a shield. It is definitely a nice looking bot, but I think I'm going to go for the apoptic anomaly because it's just that little bit nicer in my opinion. So there we go. Group C, the apoptic anomaly by Apoapsis Gaming moves forward. In the next episode, we are going to be seeing the combatants of Group E with the assault rifle Rapier, Ezis, Thorfish, Schnevel, and Moonin. So I hope you're looking forward to that episode. I hope you enjoyed this one. But until then, and as always, do take care.